You think soul food traditions are alive and well. Think again. While fried chicken stays famous, dozens of ancestral dishes are quietly vanishing from Black tables, taking generations of wisdom with them. Here are 30 soul food dishes disappearing from Black kitchens right now. Chitterlings, known as chitlins, in most Black households were once the centerpiece of holiday gatherings across the South. These slow-cooked pig intestines carried a distinctive aroma that announced celebration from blocks away. The preparation required hours of cleaning, soaking in salted water, and simmering with onions and vinegar until tender. Served hot with splashes of hot sauce and white bread, they represented resourcefulness from times when enslaved families received only discarded parts of the pig. Grandmothers guarded their recipes fiercely, knowing exactly when the texture was right. The dish connected generations to survival and celebration, carrying stories of making something treasured from scraps. Today, fewer young people learn the tedious cleaning, letting this ancestral dish fade quietly from family tables. Hog maw, the stomach lining of a pig, was once beloved on Black dinner tables across the South and Mid-Atlantic states. The preparation began with thorough cleaning until the membrane was pale and ready for cooking. Families stuffed the maw with seasoned potatoes, sausage, onions, and cabbage before sewing it shut and roasting until golden. The result was a hearty meal that stretched modest ingredients into a feast. In Pennsylvania and Maryland, hog maw dinners were community events where neighbors gathered to share plates. The dish represented the ingenuity of turning every part of the hog into nourishment. Children watched elders prepare it, learning the patience required for proper cleaning. Today, most grocery stores no longer stock hog maw, and the knowledge fades with each passing generation. Pickled pig feet sat in glass jars on kitchen counters and corner store shelves throughout Black communities for generations. The feet were cleaned, boiled until tender, then preserved in spiced vinegar brine with bay leaves and peppercorns. Eaten cold from the jar or warmed gently, they provided protein and satisfaction at minimal cost. The gelatinous texture and tangy flavor were acquired tastes passed from parents to children. In many households, pickled pig feet appeared at holidays, served with crackers to soak up the flavorful brine. They represented the philosophy that no part of the animal should go to waste. Elders believed the collagen was good for joints and skin. Corner stores kept jars by the register as affordable snacks for working folks. Today, pickled pig feet jars have largely vanished from stores and homes alike. Souse meat, sometimes called head cheese, was a traditional preparation that transformed pig heads and feet into a savory loaf. The meat simmered for hours with vinegar, onions, and spices until it fell from the bone. The cooking liquid, rich with natural gelatin, was mixed with shredded meat before being poured into molds to set. Once firm, the loaf was sliced thin and served cold with crackers or bread. The flavor was tangy and savory, with a texture both tender and slightly chewy. Black families made souse after hog killings, ensuring nothing went unused. It was practical food that could last weeks in cool cellars before refrigeration became common. Children might have wrinkled their noses, but adults treasured its complexity. Modern squeamishness about offal has pushed souse meat into memory. Neck bones simmered in gravy over fluffy white rice was a weeknight staple that fed Black families for generations on little money. The bones were browned in cast iron before being covered with water and slow cooked until fall apart tender. Onions, garlic, and black pepper created a rich gravy that thickened naturally from the collagen released during cooking. The dish required patience, often simmering for hours, but the reward was remarkable depth of flavor. Children learned to gnaw the bones clean, finding every bit of meat tucked in crevices. A pound of neck bones could feed a family of 6 when stretched with enough rice and gravy. The bones were saved for soup stock, extending their value further. Today, neck bones are harder to find, and the slow cooking tradition fades from rushed modern lives. Smothered rabbit was once common in rural black households where families raised their own meat or hunted wild rabbits that populated fields and forests. The rabbit was clean, cut into pieces, seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic, then dredged in flour and browned in cast iron. Thick sliced onions were added to the drippings before the meat was returned and covered with gravy. The pot simmered until the rabbit became fork tender and the onions melted into sweet richness. The flavor was delicate yet satisfying, somewhere between chicken and game. Families passed down knowledge of proper rabbit preparation through generations. Sunday dinners often featured smothered rabbit when company was expected. As fewer families raise livestock and hunting traditions decline, this dish has nearly disappeared from black kitchens. Fried chicken gizzards were the cook's reward, often eaten standing at the stove before dinner was served. These muscular organs required careful cleaning and tenderizing through long simmering before being dredged in seasoned flour and fried until golden. The texture was chewy with a concentrated chicken flavor, more intense than any other part of the bird. Gizzards appeared at fish fries and family gatherings, served in paper bags with toothpicks for grabbing. They were affordable protein when chicken breasts were beyond budget. Soul food restaurants once featured them prominently, served with hot sauce and white bread. Children either loved them or refused to try them, but those who acquired the taste never forgot. Gas stations sold them hot from warming cases. Today, gizzards have largely vanished from menus and home kitchens. Fried chicken livers held a special place in black Southern cooking, prized for their rich mineral flavor and affordable price. The livers were soaked in buttermilk to mellow their intensity, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried quickly until crispy outside and slightly pink within. Overcooking made them grainy, so skilled cooks knew exactly when to pull them from the oil. Served with caramelized onions, they made a complete meal with rice or bread. Livers were considered especially nourishing for pregnant women and growing children because of their iron content. Soul food cafeterias kept them in steamed tables alongside other organ meats. The smell of frying livers signaled supper in countless households. Today, even those who remember the taste struggle to find them on menus or convince younger generations to try them. Crackling bread was cornbread elevated by adding pork cracklings, the crispy bits left after rendering lard from Fatback. The cracklings were stirred into cornmeal batter before baking, creating pockets of salty, crunchy richness throughout. Each bite offered familiar cornbread comfort with unexpected bursts of porky flavor. The bread was baked in cast iron, developing a golden crust that shattered when broken. Families made crackling bread after hog killings when fresh cracklings were abundant, though some saved them for year-round enjoyment. It was served alongside beans, greens, or stews, perfect for soaking up potlikker. The bread represented the Southern philosophy of wasting nothing. Children fought over corner pieces with extra crust. As fewer families render their own lard, crackling bread fades from tradition. Hoecakes were simple cornmeal cakes that sustained black families through slavery and beyond, named for the field tools once used to cook them over open fires. The batter was cornmeal, water, salt, and sometimes bacon grease for richness. Cooked on hot griddles or cast iron, they developed crispy golden edges while staying tender in the center. Topped with thick cane syrup or sorghum molasses, they became a sweet and satisfying breakfast or supper. The syrup pooled in the surface, creating rivers of amber sweetness. Making Hoecakes required no yeast, no eggs, and minimal ingredients, accessible even in the leanest times. Grandmothers made them by feel rather than recipe, knowing when to flip by the bubbles forming. The simplicity that once made them essential now works against them, as modern kitchens favor convenience over tradition. Potlikker, the rich broth left after cooking greens with smoked meat, was never discarded in black kitchens. This murky green liquid, intensely flavored from hours of simmering collards or turnip greens with ham hocks, was considered as valuable as the greens themselves. Families would pour it into cups and drink it warm, or soak chunks of cornbread in bowls of it for a simple meal. The broth was packed with vitamins, leached from the greens and minerals from the pork bones. Elders insisted potlikker could cure colds, build strength, and settle upset stomachs. Children were encouraged to drink it despite its strong flavor. Wasting potlikker was unthinkable when it represented hours of cooking and precious ingredients. Today, most people drain their greens without a second thought, losing both nutrition and tradition. Oxtail stew was Sunday dinner elegance, built from what butchers once gave away as scraps. The bony tails required hours of braising to transform their tough collagen into silky richness. Browned first in cast iron, then simmered with tomatoes, onions, carrots, and thyme, the meat eventually surrendered from the bone into the thickened gravy. The flavor was deeply beefy with an unctuousness that coated the mouth. Families served oxtails over rice to stretch the portions, letting the gravy soak into every grain. The dish represented patience and the understanding that the best flavors came from the humblest cuts. Children learned to navigate the bones, sucking out the marrow as a special treat. Rising prices have made oxtails expensive today, and the patience for the proper braising has faded from busy households. Smothered pork chops turned inexpensive bone-in cuts into fork-tender luxury through the alchemy of slow cooking. The chops were seasoned, dredged in flour, and browned in a cast iron skillet until golden. Sliced onions were added to the drippings, sometimes with bell peppers. Then the chops were returned and covered with gravy made from pan drippings and broth. The lid went on and the heat went low, allowing the meat to braise until it nearly fell from the bone. The onions melted into the gravy, creating sweetness that balanced the savory pork. This was weeknight cooking that required attention but rewarded patience. Served with rice or mashed potatoes, the dish fed families well on modest budgets. Modern cooks rarely have the time to stand by a stove for an hour, and smothered pork chops fade from regular rotation. Salmon croquettes were Friday night supper in countless black households, made from canned salmon that cost little but deliver satisfying flavor. The salmon was drained and mixed with eggs, cracker crumbs, onions, and seasonings before being shaped into patties and fried until golden. The exterior crisped while the inside stayed moist and flaky. Families served them with grits for breakfast or alongside rice for dinner. The dish stretched one can of salmon into enough patties to feed a family of 5. Croquettes represented the ingenuity of making pantry staples feel special. Children loved their crispy texture and mild flavor. The recipe passed from mothers to daughters without being written down, learned through watching and helping. Today, canned salmon sits untouched on shelves while this thrifty tradition disappears. Liver pudding was a breakfast staple in the Carolinas, made from ground pork liver mixed with cornmeal and spices, then formed into loaves for slicing and frying. The texture was smooth with a livery richness mellowed by the grain. Sliced thick and fried until the edges crisped, it was served alongside eggs and biscuits. The pudding was economical, using organ meat that cost far less than bacon or sausage. Families who raised their own hogs made liver pudding after butchering, ensuring nothing went to waste. The flavor was bold, requiring an acquired taste that children often resisted but adults craved. Corner stores and meat markets in rural areas kept loaves in their cases. Today, liver pudding remains available in parts of the South, but has largely vanished from Black breakfast tables across the rest of the country. Fried fish and grits was breakfast that sustained Black families in coastal communities where fresh catch was plentiful and grits cost pennies. Small fish like croaker, spot, or porgy were cleaned, seasoned, dredged in cornmeal, and fried whole until crispy. Served alongside creamy grits with butter, the combination provided protein and carbohydrates to fuel a day of hard labor. Families living near water caught their own fish, making this meal essentially free. The whole fish requires skill to eat, picking meat from tiny bones, a technique passed from parents to children. Inland families made the dish with catfish when available. The smell of frying fish in the early morning announced breakfast throughout the neighborhood. As fewer families live near water and fishing traditions fade, fried fish and grits becomes rare. Red rice was a one-pot meal tracing its roots to West Africa through the Gullah Geechee communities of the Carolina and Georgia coasts. Rice was cooked in a tomato-based sauce with onions, bell peppers, and often smoked sausage or bacon for richness. The tomatoes stained the grains red while infusing them with tangy sweetness. Families served red rice at gatherings and Sunday dinners, where a single pot could feed a crowd. The dish required attention to prevent burning, developing a prized crusty bottom that elders claimed as their portion. Red rice connected Black Americans to their African ancestry through ingredients and technique. Each family had their own variation, some adding shrimp, others keeping it simple. As families scattered from coastal communities and convenience foods dominate, red rice becomes increasingly rare. Chicken bog was a humble one-pot meal from the Carolina Lowcountry where chicken, rice, and sausage simmered together until the rice absorbed all the cooking liquid. The dish got its name from the boggy consistency of properly cooked rice, wet and sticky rather than fluffy. A whole chicken was boiled until tender, then the meat was pulled and returned to the pot with rice, smoked sausage, and seasonings. The rice cooked in the flavorful broth, becoming rich and creamy. Chicken bog was church supper food, made in enormous quantities to feed entire congregations. Families gathered around the pot, serving themselves from the communal dish. The recipe required no fancy techniques, just patience in a big pot. Today, chicken bog remains beloved in small pockets of the South, but has faded from broader Black culinary tradition. Butter beans simmered with ham hocks was summer comfort when fresh limers filled garden rows across the South. The large, flat beans were shelled by hand, often by children stationed on porches with bowls in their laps. Ham hocks went into the pot first, simmering until they released their smoky flavor into the cooking liquid. The beans were added and cooked slowly until they turned creamy and began to fall apart. The dish was served in bowls with the cooking liquid, cornbread on the side for soaking. Fresh butter beans had a sweetness and texture that dry beans could never match. Families froze or canned the summer harvest to enjoy throughout winter. Shelling beans was social time when stories were told and gossip exchanged. Today, few people grow butter beans or have the patience for hand shelling. Stewed tomatoes and okra was summer in a pot, made when both vegetables ripened simultaneously in southern gardens. Ripe tomatoes were chopped and simmered until they broke down into thick sauce. Fresh okra, sliced into rounds, was added and cooked until tender, its natural thickening properties giving the stew body. Onions, garlic, and a touch of sugar balanced the acidity. Served over rice or with cornbread, the dish was simple, satisfying, and free for families who grew their own produce. The okra's slight sliminess divided opinions, but those who loved it craved it throughout winter. Canning the stew preserved summer's bounty for colder months. The combination represented African influence on southern cooking, both vegetables having roots in West Africa. As gardens disappear from backyards, this seasonal dish vanishes too. Pig ear sandwiches were once sold from roadside stands and corner joints throughout the Deep South, a delicacy that required slow simmering to transform tough cartilage into tender gelatinous slices. The ears were cleaned meticulously, then braised for hours with vinegar, onions, and spices until they could be sliced thin. Served on white bread with hot sauce and pickles, they offered a chewy texture unlike anything else. The flavor was mild pork enriched by the cooking liquid. These sandwiches represented the ingenuity of Black cooks, who found value in what others discarded. Children grew up eating them at community gatherings and roadside stands. The ears provided collagen believed to benefit skin and joints. Today, pig ear sandwiches have nearly vanished, surviving only in scattered joints across the rural South. Smoked neck bones and cabbage was a one-pot meal that filled houses with rich, smoky aroma for hours. The bones, already cured and smoked, were simmered in water until their meat became tender and their flavor infused the cooking liquid. Wedges of cabbage were added toward the end, cooking until soft but not mushy, absorbing the porky essence from the broth. Potatoes or carrots stretched the meal further when money was tight. The dish was served in deep bowls, the broth as important as the solids. Families made it on cold evenings when warmth and comfort were needed. The smoked bones provided depth that fresh meat could never match. Children soaked bread in the flavorful broth. Today, smoked neck bones are hard to find, and the patience for slow-simmered meals has faded from hurried lives. Fatback and fried apples was a breakfast that combined savory and sweet in ways modern palates might find surprising. Thick slices of salted fatback were fried slowly until they rendered their fat and turned crispy around the edges. Apples were sliced and cooked in the rendered fat with a little sugar, becoming soft and caramelized. The combination was served with biscuits, the crispy pork balancing the sweet fruit. This was harvest breakfast when apples hung heavy on trees and hogs had been recently butchered. The dish provided calories needed for long days of farm work. The fatback's saltiness enhanced the apple's natural sweetness. Children loved the combination, though they might not have understood its nutritional logic. As vegetable oils replaced animal fats in kitchens, fatback and fried apples faded from morning tables. Crackling cornbread dressing was Thanksgiving tradition in Black households, richer than ordinary. Stuffing, because of the pork cracklings, folded into every bite. Cornbread was crumbled and mixed with sautéed celery, onions, and sage, then moistened with turkey broth until it reached the perfect consistency. Cracklings, saved from rendering lard, were stirred in before baking, adding pockets of salty crunch. The dressing, baked until golden on top while staying moist inside. Families guarded their recipes closely, each believing theirs was superior. The dish connected holiday tables to the fall hog killings that once defined rural life. Children helped crumble the cornbread, learning through participation. Today, few families render their own lard, and cracklings are difficult to find, pushing this tradition toward extinction. Blackberry dumplings were summer dessert made when wild berries grew thick along fence rows and children picked them with stained fingers. The berries were simmered with sugar until they released their juices, then spoonfuls of biscuit. Dough were dropped into the bubbling fruit. The pot was covered and the dumplings steamed until fluffy, soaking up the purple juice from below. The dish was served warm in bowls, the soft dumplings swimming in sweet berry sauce. Some families added cream, others ate it plain. Picking berries was part of the experience, children competing to fill buckets before eating too many. The dessert required no oven, made entirely on the stovetop during summer when heating the kitchen was unwelcome. As wild berry patches disappear and convenience desserts dominate, blackberry dumplings fade from memory. Streoline was salt-cured pork belly with more meat than regular fatback, fried until crispy and served with hot biscuits for soaking up the flavorful grease. The meat was sliced thin and cooked slowly, rendering its fat while the lean portions turned chewy and intensely savory. Biscuits made from lard or shortening were split and pressed into the rendered fat, absorbing its salty richness. This was working breakfast, providing the calories and salt needed for hard physical labor in hot conditions. The combination was simple but deeply satisfying. Families kept streoline in salt boxes or smokehouses, preserved without refrigeration. Children grew up eating it before school, the fat sustaining them through long mornings. Today, streoline is hard to find outside specialty butchers, and the dish fades with it. Poke salad, made from the young shoots of pokeweed, was spring tradition in Black communities across the South. The plant grew wild in disturbed soil, its tender shoots gathered before they became toxic with maturity. The greens required multiple boilings to remove dangerous compounds, a process passed down through generations of careful cooks. Once properly prepared, the greens were sautéed with bacon grease and onions, becoming tender and slightly earthy. Families gathered poke as a free vegetable after winter's scarcity, a sign that warm weather had finally arrived. The dish connected Black Americans to foraging traditions that predated grocery stores. Elders knew exactly when to pick and how to prepare safely. Today, fear of the plant's toxicity and loss of foraging knowledge have pushed poke salad from most kitchens. Molasses stacked cake was celebration dessert built from thin layers of spice cake spread with apple butter between each tier. The cake layers were rolled thin and baked quickly, more like cookies than traditional cake. Apple butter, slowly cooked from autumn's harvest, served as both filling and frosting. The assembled cake was wrapped and allowed to sit for days, the moisture from the filling softening the dry layers into tender perfection. Each layer represented a contribution from family or community, the stack sometimes reaching 8 or more tiers. The cake required planning and patience, unsuited to last-minute preparation. Families made it for weddings, funerals, and holidays when extended family gathered. Today, the multi-day preparation and difficulty finding proper apple butter have made stacked cakes increasingly rare. Fried corn was summer supper made when fresh ears filled farmers' markets and backyard gardens. Kernels were cut from the cob, then scraped to release their milky liquid. The corn was cooked slowly in bacon drippings or butter until it began to caramelize, developing sweet and savory depth. Some cooks added cream, others kept it simple with just fat and seasoning. The dish was served as a side alongside fried chicken or pork chops. Fresh corn's natural sweetness concentrated during cooking, becoming almost candy-like at the browned edges. Families made fried corn throughout summer, preserving the technique when freezers allowed year-round enjoyment. Children helped shuck and silk the ears, learning to feel for full kernels. Today, canned corn has replaced fresh in most kitchens, and the slow frying technique fades from practice. Sweet potato pone was dense, caramelized dessert baked low and slow until the natural sugars created a candy-like crust. Grated raw sweet potatoes were mixed with molasses, spices, and butter before being poured into a greased pan and baked for hours. The top developed a dark, almost burnt layer that contrasted with the creamy interior. The texture was unlike pie, denser and chewier, more like candy than custard. Families made pone when sweet potatoes were freshly dug from gardens each fall. The recipe required no flour, relying entirely on the potatoes' starch for structure. Children loved scraping the caramelized edges from the pan. Elders remembered pone from their own childhoods, the recipe stretching back generations. Today, sweet potato pone survives only in the memories of those old enough to remember their grandmothers making it.
Cowpeas and rice pilaf offered a taste of Carolina heritage that African American families carried forward with pride during the 1970s. Dried cowpeas soaked overnight were simmered gently with smoked turkey wings or a ham hock until tender, releasing a broth rich with earthy flavor. Long grain rice was added to the pot, soaking up the seasoned liquid and transforming the dish into a complete meal. Onions, celery, and a hint of thyme gave the pilaf a savory depth, while a dash of hot pepper added subtle heat. Served with cornbread or fried green tomatoes, it filled bellies and satisfied the craving for something both nourishing and steeped in tradition. This was a dinner that honored the resilience of generations who turned humble ingredients into lasting comfort. It carried the memory of fields and family gardens while fitting neatly into busy urban kitchens. Cowpeas and rice pilaf reminded everyone that simple foods, cooked with patience and love, could rival any fancy restaurant meal when shared around a welcoming table. Fried corn pone was a dish that required almost nothing but cornmeal, water, and lard, yet it managed to fill stomachs during times of want. It was denser than cornbread and more rustic, formed into small patties and fried in cast-iron skillets until golden. Families leaned on it for breakfast, lunch, or supper because it was inexpensive, used ingredients they almost always had, and could be made quickly. Corn was abundant across the South, and every pantry had a sack of cornmeal that could be stretched into meals again and again. Eating fried corn pone often meant there was no wheat bread to be had, but no one went hungry. It was eaten with beans, dipped in potlikker, or just on its own with a smear of molasses or syrup if available. Fried corn pone reflected the determination to create something warm and satisfying even when the cupboards were close to bare. Chick-baked rice pudding with raisins was a dessert that came together from what was already in the kitchen, making it a perfect example of soul food thrift and ingenuity. Leftover rice was never thrown away. Instead, it was mixed with milk, eggs, sugar, and warm spices like cinnamon or nutmeg, then baked slowly until it set into a creamy custard. Raisins added bursts of sweetness, plumping up as they absorbed the milk and spice. This pudding often marked the end of Sunday dinner, or was made on special occasions when the house filled with the scent of vanilla and baked sugar. Served warm or chilled, it carried the taste of comfort and resourcefulness, especially during times when store-bought desserts were too costly. Every cook had their own variation, some adding a touch of lemon zest or a sprinkle of nutmeg on top for extra flavor. It was a dish that could be enjoyed over several days, growing richer as the flavors melded in the refrigerator. While boxed pudding mixes replaced many homemade versions over the years, nothing matches the texture or taste of rice pudding baked slowly in the oven with raisins scattered like little treasures throughout. Fried porgi with hot sauce carried the salt air of the Atlantic coast right into neighborhood kitchens and fish fries across the 1970s South and Northeast. Porgi, a small but flavorful ocean fish, was cleaned, scored, and dredged in a seasoned cornmeal mixture before sliding into hot peanut oil. The crackle of frying fish and the sharp scent of cayenne filled the air as golden fillets emerged crisp and steaming. A drizzle of homemade hot sauce or a squeeze of lemon brought just enough heat and brightness to balance the sweet, briny meat. Families served it with sliced white bread, coleslaw, or grits, letting the simple sides highlight the catch of the day. For many households, this was more than a meal. It was a reason for gathering, a chance to laugh and share stories while the fish came out of the pan in batches. Affordable and deeply satisfying, fried porgy celebrated coastal traditions and proved that fresh fish and a steady hand could create a dinner worthy of any weekend crowd. Stewed okra and tomatoes were the kind of dish that took simple garden produce and turned it into something nourishing enough to feed a family. Okra, a vegetable with African origins, thrived in southern soil, while tomatoes grew easily in backyard gardens. Together, simmered slowly with onions, spices, and sometimes a scrap of salt pork, they created a stew that was tangy, savory, and thick. Families relied on it because it stretched small harvests into larger meals, often served over rice or with cornbread to make it filling. The dish was especially important when meat was too expensive to buy, as it added depth and nutrition without needing animal protein. Stewed okra and tomatoes became more than food. They were a way to survive with what the land provided. For many, the taste carried reminders of summer gardens and the hard work it took to keep families fed. It was frugal, delicious, and a perfect example of survival cooking. Cabbage and salt pork stew was the kind of meal that could stretch to feed a crowd without stretching the budget. The cabbage would be chopped and simmered slowly with chunks of salt pork, which released their fat and smoky flavor into the pot. The result was tender, silky cabbage leaves bathed in a savory broth with just the right touch of salt. In many homes, this dish was a weeknight regular, not because it was flashy, but because it was filling, dependable, and used ingredients that were always on hand. Served alongside cornbread or over a small scoop of rice, it could transform the simplest table into a satisfying meal. This stew also carried the comforting smell of something cooking low and slow, the kind of aroma that filled the whole house and made everyone hungry before it was even served. It was the food of patience, where the flavors had time to come together without rush. Supermarkets today offer pre-shredded cabbage and processed pork products, but they cannot recreate the texture and taste of the old, home-cooked version. For those who grew up with it, cabbage and salt pork stew was proof that thrift and flavor could live in the same pot. Cornmeal-crusted okra cakes turned a beloved southern vegetable into a crispy entree that delighted both adults and children during the 1970s. Fresh okra pods were sliced thin and mixed with cornmeal, minced onions, and a touch of buttermilk to create a thick batter. Small patties were formed by hand and pan, fried in hot oil until each cake developed a crunchy golden crust with a tender green interior. The nutty flavor of the cornmeal complemented the mild tang of the okra, while a sprinkle of salt right out of the pan sealed in the warmth. Served alongside sliced tomatoes or a dollop of hot sauce, these cakes were both hearty and refreshingly light. They made clever use of garden harvests when okra plants produced more pods than anyone could stew. Families prized the recipe as a thrifty way to transform vegetables into a main dish that felt indulgent. Each bite offered a satisfying crunch and a reminder that the simplest garden gifts could create meals worth remembering decades later. Cowpea fritters were a dish that came straight out of resilience and memory, with roots reaching back to African cooking traditions. Families would soak and mash dried cowpeas, mix them with a little onion, cornmeal, and seasoning, then fry the mixture in hot lard until crisp on the outside and soft inside. They were cheap, filling, and carried the rich protein that many households could not always get from meat. For Black families in the South, cowpeas were already a staple crop, so using them to create something hearty made perfect sense. These fritters could be eaten plain or dipped in gravy, and they were often made in batches large enough to last a day or two. They carried a deep sense of history, because this kind of cooking showed how old-world techniques adapted to the realities of hard times in America. They were not only nourishment, but also a connection to ancestors who had relied on the same beans for strength. Potlikker soup was more than just a humble broth. It was the essence of the greens it came from. When collards, turnip greens, or mustard greens simmered slowly with a bit of seasoning and maybe a ham bone, the cooking liquid would take on a deep, savory flavor and a rich, earthy aroma. Nothing in the kitchen went to waste, and that pot liquor was treasured for its nourishment, especially in leaner times. It was often sipped straight from a bowl or paired with cornbread, which was crumbled right into the broth to soak up every last drop. This soup carried vitamins, minerals, and memories of long afternoons spent around the table, talking as the pot bubbled on the stove. In African American kitchens, it was both medicine and comfort, believed to restore strength after illness or a hard day's work. The taste was unmistakable, salty, smoky, and green all at once, with each batch a little different depending on the greens and the cook. Today, store-bought greens rarely yield the same kind of rich cooking liquid, and many younger cooks have never tasted this kitchen staple. Yet for those who remember, pot liquor was a liquid linked to home. Braised turkey wings with pan gravy brought families together around a big Sunday table when the 1970s called for dinners that were both hearty and affordable. Large turkey wings were seasoned with garlic, black pepper, and a dusting of paprika before browning in a heavy skillet to build a deep flavor base. They were then slow roasted in a covered pan with onions, celery, and homemade stock until the meat grew so tender it slid from the bone. The drippings were whisked into a silky pan gravy that soaked perfectly into a mound of steamed white rice or buttered cornbread. The rich aroma filled the house and made even a simple weeknight feel like a celebration. Home cooks appreciated how the dish stretched a few inexpensive pieces of poultry into a feast that felt as grand as a holiday meal. In many African American kitchens, this recipe became a quiet statement of resourcefulness and comfort, a way to honor tradition while feeding everyone well when money was tight but hearts were full of welcome. Pickled watermelon rind was a dish born out of a waste-not spirit. When families ate fresh watermelon, they saved the rinds, slicing off the tough green skin and brining the white flesh in vinegar, sugar, and spices. The result was a tangy, sweet pickle that could be eaten alongside meats, beans, or cornbread. In hard times, nothing edible was thrown away, and this recipe proved that even scraps could become something delicious. Pickled rind added brightness to plates that were otherwise heavy with starch and salt, lifting meals and making them feel more balanced. Children loved the odd flavor, and adults appreciated that it stretched food supplies further. Pickled watermelon rind became common in many Southern households, passed down as a recipe of ingenuity. It turned what was once destined for the trash into something cherished, embodying the creativity of Black families making do with what they had. Skillet candied yams were a feast for both the eyes and the taste buds, glistening in a thick glaze of butter, brown sugar, and spices. Sweet potatoes were peeled and sliced thick, then arranged in a cast-iron skillet where they simmered gently in the sweet, buttery syrup. Cinnamon and nutmeg added warmth, while the natural sugars from the potatoes deepened the caramelization. This was not a quick dish. The yams were left to cook slowly until every slice was tender and every surface was coated with the glossy glaze. The smell alone could draw family members into the kitchen, eager for a taste before the meal was served. On holiday tables, this side dish often sat beside savory meats, providing a sweet contrast that balanced the plate. In everyday meals, it was a treat that made even a humble dinner feel special. Supermarkets today offer canned versions, but they cannot replicate the rich, layered flavor of fresh yams caramelized in a skillet. For those who remember, the first bite of skillet candied yams was pure Southern comfort, the kind that lingered long after the plate was clean. Country-style ribs with apple cider glaze turned weekend gatherings into sweet, smoky celebrations in African-American neighborhoods across the 1970s. Meaty pork ribs were marinated in apple cider, brown sugar, and a splash of vinegar, then slow roasted or charcoal grilled until the meat was fall-apart tender. Midway through cooking, the ribs were brushed with a thick cider glaze that caramelized over the heat, creating a sticky surface that clung to every finger. The scent of roasting pork and sweet apples drifted across backyards, drawing neighbors and cousins long before dinner was served. Served with potato salad, baked beans, or simple white bread, the dish balanced tang and richness perfectly. It was both a nod to Southern barbecue traditions and a chance to add a fruity twist that felt fresh for the decade. Country-style ribs with apple cider glaze embodied the joy of family cookouts, where music played late into the evening and every plate carried the flavor of smoke, sweetness, and laughter shared outdoors. Sorghum syrup bread was a wartime and Depression-era answer to expensive refined sugar. Sorghum, a tall grass grown widely in the South, was boiled down into a thick, dark syrup that tasted earthy and sweet. Families would use it in place of sugar, mixing it into simple bread doughs to stretch rations and still enjoy something satisfying. Sorghum syrup bread was hearty, with a flavor that carried a touch of bitterness but warmed the spirit. Children often slathered slices with butter or drippings, while adults enjoyed it with strong coffee. It was a farm food at its core, tied directly to the fields where sorghum stalks grew. Sorghum bread meant that no one had to give up sweetness completely even when sugar prices were too high or stores ran out. This loaf was practical, easy to make at home, and deeply tied to Southern soil. After times of scarcity passed, sorghum faded, but the memory of that dark bread stayed.
Which disappearing dish do you remember from your family's kitchen? Drop it in the comments, hit like, and subscribe so these traditions never fully fade away.